Okay, so now what we want to talk about is how to actually mount these things up. Now listen, this is not uncommon to have just a standard board here, but again, I really feel that this is a much more superior way of doing this, and there are different style of taper locks, but this one, I particularly like it. So what we do with this taper lock is we want to make sure that we see that the large opening here, as opposed to this side, because it's a taper, this is going to be smaller in diameter, this is going to be larger. Likewise, find the smaller and larger and see how they correspond with each other. They should fit in and nest with each other just like this. Now, the appropriate orientation, you're going to rotate this around. What we want is we want these two to line up. So we have this and this here. That lines up. If you get it 180 degrees out, it will not actually line up. Okay, so you can see one lines up but the other one doesn't. So it is very particular about where it goes. Now with those two lined up, you'll notice that the threads are in the outer part of the sprocket. You can find your set screws here and you can start them. And what's going to happen is the set screw is going to go down and push on this using the thread from here to force this down. As it goes down, the taper gets smaller and it will squeeze this together onto our shaft. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it together, all right, and this is still movable, which I want. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my shaft and I'm going to begin to install it. I may have my key already in play here, and I'm going to, the best that I can, line that up. And then I can kind of pull this together slightly. I want to make sure that I'm gripping on all my shaft. Take the appropriate key, and I'm going to start running this together. Now, it might be a little sloppy here or there, but the important thing to remember is you want to run these set screws in just until they stop. Look, I'm not putting any torque, it's just whatever I can do with my pinching my fingers here. And then once really I'm down where I want to be, I can put the key in the other orientation, put a little bit of pressure, and then do an equal amount of pressure on this other side, going back and forth, okay? Why would I do that? Well, the reason that I do that is so that I'm trying to pull the two halves of those couplings together evenly instead of putting a whole bunch of pressure on one side and then a whole bunch of pressure on the other side. I want to evenly go down until I finally get it to the torque. Now, for the purpose of this lab, we're not going to make this super duper tight because it's just going to make it more difficult to actually take apart, okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about taking this apart. We first crack this loose, crack the other one loose, okay? So it's reverse order. And we're going to bring this out a little bit, okay, so we have a little bit of exposed. We want to make sure there's room there for these two things to separate. And then we're going to fully remove one of these set screws. And then we're going to stick it in this other hole that we haven't used yet, okay? And as we put it in this hole, it is reversed. The thread is actually on this piece, and then this is clearance, and so it will act to jack these two pieces apart. So once we get this in here, it might require a good bit of pressure, but we're going to crank this thing around, and eventually it's going to push hard enough on those tapers in order to release the two. Okay, and it might be hard to see on the camera, but this right here just started to separate from the internal part, slides right off. Okay, so that's how you put these style of taper locks on and off.